It's Breaking Bet here on this Week 14 slate. December 4th, we're officially in the last month of the calendar 2024 year. Apologies for the week off last week. It was absolute chaos. I had tons of things happening, and Eric and my schedule could not line up. But hopefully you had a great Thanksgiving and some winners. But my boy Eric is back this week. We're ready to do a full slate for this new week of football. How you doing, brother?
Doing great, bro. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Hope everybody else had a great Thanksgiving as well. Another week where I have a couple more strong opinions on some of these games for this slate. So I'm definitely excited to see where we agree or where we disagree this week.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because like I'm watching some of the stuff you got going on here, right? Where it's just like some of the games that we disagreed on. You've gotten the benefit of the doubt on some of these games. And every time I watch Saquon Barkley, I go back thinking like, wow, Eric had Barkley as an offensive player of the year contender going back to the summer. Like him, you know, maybe I should have listened there. So some pretty good opinions going on. Let's see what we carry on into this week. But before we do, as we do every time out, what's the favorite look you have coming into this Sunday?
My favorite bet for Sunday is Minnesota. I got them 4.5. I give out to everybody in Parlay Science. Obviously betting myself 2-unit play. I got 4.5. It's at 5.5, kind of like a dead number. So I don't hate it if it gets to 6. Obviously love it as a teaser. But yeah, at 5.5, I would probably still bet it also. We've seen Kirk Cousins, bro, lately, and it's embarrassing. Like he's really, really bad right now. He's clearly hobbled. He can't make plays, and the only times he's looked good this season, for the most part, is coming against like very bad teams. Like the Vikings defense is going to blitz the hell out of him, and he can't move. So I love the Vikings this week, Johnny.
Oh, you know, it's funny because you said 5.5 dead number. What is the 5.5?
This close to pre-kickoff, I don't think this is closing a Royal Mint. Let's put it that way.
All right? Yeah, it is a Royal Mint spot. So, I mean, here's the thing. There. Coming into this week, I said, "Wow, Vikings, Falcons." Vikings were always a team that seemingly had Atlanta's number. It was just a situation where, and obviously, so much has changed in the last 10, 15 years. You know, from watching Matt Ryan and Julio against whoever Minnesota was throwing out a quarterback. But, you know, based on the DNA of the team, it's two teams that are trending in opposite directions as well. You have Atlanta losing really close games, not winning games they should win, whereas Minnesota is winning games they should not win. They're finding a way in these close games. Like, I think both of us can realistically agree Minnesota probably should have lost their last 4 games, even going back to Jacksonville. But they found a way to pull it out. I will say this, though. I don't think this is going to close at 5.5 come 1 o'clock on Sunday. But I probably would say I think I would lay out to maybe 7 with Minnesota, depending on where it goes. But let's not forget, though, Atlanta has played horrible, right? This is a Kirk Cousins revenge game. This is a game where Atlanta, this weird thing that they do where they decide to start showing up and playing football. And this would be like one of those games where they go into Minnesota, US Bank Stadium, and they pull out the outright win because that's just what they do. When you least expect them to show up, they show up.
Obviously, I defer to you when it comes to, Falcon ball knowledge and the history and like the vibe of the team. But like you had mentioned, obviously, same owner. So I guess that and GM. So that stays the same. Obviously, new coaching staff, new QB. I don't know, though. Like, obviously, Kirk Cousins had a really great tenure in Minnesota. But when you go back to him in Washington, like when they needed to win as a Washington Commander fan, he lost every time we needed to win. So I don't think that now, 8 years later, 1 Achilles tear and 13 weeks of football, or I guess 12 because with the bye week, 12 weeks of football, considering how he's looked the last 3 weeks, as immobile, as inaccurate at ball speed, looking like it's down, I am ready to say that I would be really shocked if Kirk Cousins all of a sudden looks like the Kirk Cousins we know he can be against this really blitz-heavy Vikings defense. And I think that Kevin O'Connell, the way that he goes against the defense of Falcons coach Raheem Morris, I think that that's like a mismatch as well. So I love the Vikings this week.
Yeah, I mean, I would lean Minnesota. I hope it doesn't close Royalman territory, so I don't have to feel compelled. I am waiting on Michael Penix, though, man. I think Michael Penix, this is a situation where it wouldn't surprise me to see him. I feel like they kind of owe it to have Penix in. And listen, Cousins has not played well at all, but he's catching a lot of heat on that pick six that kind of decided the game against the Chargers on Sunday, where Darnell Mooney looks like he didn't go far enough out, and Cousins threw the ball to the inside, and it looked like it had no zip. I mean, I watched that play a few times. It looked like maybe Cousins expected Mooney to sit down and not keep going, and that's why it looked like it was a flutter ball. So I think maybe some of this stuff is like taken out of context a little bit. But, I mean, it is fair to say Cousins has definitely not looked good. He had 4 picks last week. The last few weeks has been nothing like what we saw earlier in the year. So I don't know if the one thing I'm curious about is if there's more going on. Is he hurt? Is there something maybe with an arm injury, or is his lower half still not right? Because the turn he's had from good, solid to good to really bad is head scratching.
Yeah, and again, like it's not just like I'm thinking that he's a little bit worse. Like it's not even just like the box score numbers he's playing worse. So you have to go into like some of the EPA numbers. Like the 2 best games he's had has been against the Buccaneers both times, and we know the Buccaneers do not have a great defense whatsoever. Some of the other games without them, he's produced like negative EPAs. Like he hasn't been great, and this is again the best defense that he's played. So if you would exclude 2 games against a bad Tampa team, honestly, like which you can't do, obviously he did show up and play well. He's looking like a slightly below average quarterback rather than like being like the Kirk Cousins who was like clearly above average. I don't think I don't think it's the spot for him unless he like again like not to go too much here because it's obvious how I like it. I don't want to speculate too much, but unless there's no injury and he's got like he really does get that fire in him, sure, but like he doesn't look right and he hasn't played well. So yeah, I'm expecting that to continue.
Yeah, no, I completely get it. So that's actually something that is a little bit appealing for me as well. For my game, there's not too much that I love on the card this week, but I gotta say, let's just go ahead and look ahead to it. Buffalo Bills, LA Rams, and it's just kind of a 2-4, right? I should say. The Bills traveling to the Rams, east to west. Typically, the Rams in the travel favorite spots, like where they're getting the benefit of the travel, hasn't mattered. I mean, Miami came into the LA a few weeks ago and they dismantled the Rams. Other spots in the season, the Rams have not lived up to like, they get the travel rest situation and therefore they're going to play better. Buffalo right now, man, and I think, you remember we talked about it. I personally didn't expect that much out of Buffalo. I thought their window was just about not over, but closing. I mean, obviously you have Allen, so it's hard to say it's over with a quarterback like Josh Allen still with a lot of good football left in him. But, to be fair, the offense doesn't really have that many stars outside of James Cook and Allen. The defense is solid, but it's not the unit that it was a couple years ago. But still, they're finding ways to win games. And I feel like the Rams have not showed me enough to say that, hey, this is a team that can be a real threat in the playoffs or even make the playoffs or have any semblance of winning their division. I think this 4.5 here, despite me still liking the Rams to stay competitive with the offensive weapons they have in Kupp and Nakua and Kyron, who had a great game in New Orleans last week. I just don't know if it's going to be enough here. With Buffalo playing the way they have been, I think they can win this game by at least a touchdown.
Yeah, it's down to 3.5. I see at DraftKings. Some of the sharper books are sitting 4 as well. So some movement in the Rams' favor. And I do agree with you. Like, I think the Bills, like, at least for this year, are like too much of a wagon where, like, regardless of, like you said, like crappy travel spot off short rest, like generally, yeah, you think about that. But I think this Bills team might be like impervious to that. And again, like you mentioned, the Rams have had some great games, some really poor games. I do obviously trust McVay as a coach. This is also a must win for Los Angeles. Can't really afford many more losses if they want to make a little bit of a run here. But I'm not in the business right now of fading Buffalo. Like the devil's advocate side is like you add on like the the hype of them covering of winning the division, and you add on the travel and short rest. But for the Rams, I'm this is not something I'm interested in taking a position really against you here, Johnny, at all. And definitely lean being on your side.
Yeah, so here's the thing, right? This is kind of why I want to tie in. I know we're not going to dive that much into it, but I just wanted to bring it up for the people interested in the MVP conversation. So you have Buffalo at LA this week. I think both of us not only expect a win for Buffalo, but a cover as well, kind of putting the Rams' playoff hopes on life support. But the Thursday night game tomorrow should be a fantastic one. We haven't had many of those this year. It's the Lions at home with my second favorite spread, a 3.5 point favorite number for Detroit, hosting Green Bay. Detroit won the first game in Green Bay about a month ago. High total at 51.5. Eric, here's the thing, right? Next week, Detroit hosts Buffalo. That's big for so many reasons. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's entertaining. And this could very well determine how the seedings shake out in the respective conferences. But in the MVP market, right now, Josh Allen's just short of minus 300. Let's say Detroit wins tomorrow and Buffalo wins on Sunday. Now, a game that is maybe the only team that's really, outside of like Philadelphia possibly, the only team that's really, really difficult for Buffalo is Detroit. So now this game with playoff implications, you're about to get Jared Goff at 15-1 MVP. So Josh Allen right now at minus 280 is not worth it to bet. So if Detroit wins that Buffalo game next week and Jared Goff has a solid game, now 15-1 on Goff becomes a very, very good investment heading into next week's game. So if he gets the nod on Buffalo, Detroit realistically going 14-3 or 15-2, getting the 1 seed in the NFC, Goff having 35 touchdowns could be enough for him to win the MVP. It's certainly worth a bet at this point with, a 15-1 ticket. I mean, maybe Barkley at 5-1 is still alive as well. I don't know how you feel about that, but before we get into that MVP, what do you think about this Detroit game here?
Well, honestly, I want to follow up with that right now because I do agree with you at this point. Like, if you don't have any equity, like you've talked about Goff MVP from summer, getting in some prices there, and you've even mentioned it at times throughout the show where you were, looking at some of the peaks of the pricing, and you're like, all right, like at this point, I'm still interested in Goff, and at 15-1, your thought process is correct. Like this reminds me of last year when I got in on Brock Purdy when he was like around like 12 or 13-1 ish. Around this time, it was around Christmas, maybe it was like a week or two later. Well, for short though, that was going into that Baltimore game where I had the same thought process as you. If they win this game, now there's a path for him to be. And I had some line value. Obviously, they got destroyed, and that ticket was as good as dead right there on the spot. Not saying that's the case, but I'm saying the exact opposite. I'm saying regardless if that does happen, I think it's good process. And that's a good segue into this because I love the Packers here. I know it's probably where I know you love your 3.5, and we'll see where it closes. We've seen a lot of late steam in the NFL in terms of like, especially the primetime games, definitely on Sundays as well. And while generally like, you never really know like, what steam is, head fakes, what steam is really the sharp money moving the lines. There's obviously speculation, things you could figure out, etc. But I'm curious where this line closes at, and if it does support Detroit, obviously I'm sitting on 3.5. I bet it already with the Packers, so we'll see what happens. But I think the Packers are live to win outright tomorrow, and that would obviously kill the ticket. But I'm not saying don't take the MVP ticket. I'm still saying, if you like Detroit, I would go that route that you explained.
So here's the thing. It's hard to sweep a good divisional opponent in the season. And I don't think Green Bay's a pushover. I think they are very live. But to be honest, the reason why I still like Detroit is I feel like their formula is more soundproof. And they're playing at home, a spot where they very rarely lose, let alone not cover. I don't know about Green Bay. Like the one thing they really have going in their favor right now is just the emergence. Like we talked about this in the summer of Josh Jacobs. Like this is a guy that could potentially lead the league in rushing, or he can lead the league in rush touchdowns. And, honestly, if not for Barkley having a fantastic year and Henry having a fantastic year, Josh Jacobs has been the third best back in the NFL. I mean, it wasn't an over-exaggeration. This guy's having a fantastic year, but the run he's been on lately has been huge. And that's what kind of gives Green Bay that chance to win. I don't know if I love the consistency enough from the other playmakers that they have. Outside of Jaden Reed, you're not getting a lot of consistency from the receivers. Christian Watson makes a big play here and there. You got Dontavian Wicks, who's good for like 3 or 4 drops a game. When Romeo Dobbs is healthy, Tucker Kraft has honestly been their best receiver after Jaden Reed. Love has been good. I don't think he's been great. And to beat this Detroit team in Detroit, you got to be great, because you can only run the ball so much. You got to be able to execute off play action. And their defense, to be honest, hasn't been as good as I would hope. You're missing Jair Alexander. So I understand the Green Bay take. If they run the ball well and Jacobs handles 25 carries for $130, 2 scores, yeah, they're live. For me, I'm going with Detroit. I think Detroit wins this game. They realize the importance of this division race. They have Minnesota nipping at their heels, so they can't afford to take their foot off the gas.
So let me ask you something, because one thing that I don't think that let me put it this way. One of the things that is so prominent for my handicap on the Green Bay Packers is the injuries to the Lions defense. They are absolutely decimated. This is a team who's got 2 great safeties that are fortunately healthy, a terrible group of cornerbacks. They had some good linebackers. Anzalone, I'm pretty sure, is hurt, and there's another linebacker. I have it right here. Levi, I'm not even going to – Levi, I'm not going to even try to pronounce his last name. Defensive end, he's out. DJ Reader's been out. Obviously, Aiden Hutchinson's been out. Like, this is the most decimated Malcolm Rodriguez, who I was looking for, he's on IR. Like, their defense was punching well above its weight class, as they were the couple weeks prior to that Bears game. Like, they're one of the top defenses in EPA success rate. They're now lost starters at every single level. They have starters, some of them being vital pieces to their team, some of them being people that just have to play because the other people aren't even good to their team. So now the backups obviously are not going to be able to play at that same level. And they play an exclusively man coverage defense, and that's what Aaron Glenn does. And Jordan Love has 5 weapons. It doesn't matter. Like, obviously, if you ask anybody, like, the team would rather have the wealth be spread around, and they're winning football games and having like one receiver to put up 110 yards. Like, they have weapons all over the field, obviously Josh Jacobs then included. So we saw the Lions lose to the Packers on Thanksgiving last year. Obviously, it's not Thanksgiving. I see a similar scenario, Johnny. And my question to you, right back to you, is if you're talking about this Packers team currently now and this Lions team with their injuries now, like, they're probably closer to than 3.5 points, and I'll gladly take the points in the divisional matchup. That's kind of where I'm going with it.
I mean, I get it. I do. Detroit is definitely battling some injuries, but luckily, they've had a week to prepare. So this really isn't a short week. And listen, I'm
Thanksgiving too. It's normal rest.
Yeah, this is a normal rest game for both teams. I understand what you're talking about, but like, if there's one team that really embodies the next man up mentality, it's Detroit. They get these guys from out of nowhere. And I'm not saying that the losses they have, the cluster injuries, won't be a factor. It definitely could be. I mean, especially considering Detroit's run defense is top 5 in the NFL right now. Right? The area to attack them is in the secondary, which has been kind of a hit or miss theatric with Green Bay. Now, covering 3.5 is definitely possible. I like staying with, my number. I like betting my number, and I like betting the team that has been a wagon, a team that honestly hurt a lot of people by not covering a spread that they should have on Thanksgiving with some weird fourth quarter antics.
They didn't cover the spread because they were so decimated, and Caleb Williams was able to move the football because he stinks, but he was playing against backups. I think
but I mean, it was even offensively though. Offensively, there was a couple drives that they had to settle for field goals that they were in complete control for most of the game. Jahmyr Gibbs fumble at the 2-yard line. There was a few instances where they could have taken a much bigger lead. So that game was a lot closer than it should have ever been. Enough said. I understand why you're gonna take the shot with Green Bay here. Do you think Green Bay wins outright too?
They're 100% live to win outright. I haven't bet the money line.
Would you bet them? Are you going to bet them?
I have my 3. I have two units on 3.5. I'm probably just gonna ride 3.5. I would not be shocked if they win outright, but I'll just take my 3.5 points. I haven't been betting this NFL season. I haven't been splitting my money lines on my underdogs with money line and spread.
Hold on. You're missing what I'm asking. What I'm saying is if you had to pick a winner in this game,
Green Bay Packers.
Win outright, Green Bay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm on Detroit. Listen, I respect your opinion. I know you know what you're talking about. You do your homework. I completely get it. And we've been on opposite sides, and I've won some. You've won some.
Of course.
Listen, Detroit is this is the team. Now, I'm not even just talking about the spread. The spread is my whole thing. And also, not for nothing, when you're betting, obviously, shop around. 3.5 on FanDuel. You're getting Green Bay at 3.5 on FanDuel, -118, whereas you're getting a 3 on DraftKings, Green Bay only -102. So it depends, obviously, with that key half a point hook, key number. Obviously,
it's still 3.5, 115 at FanDuel. I mean, at Caesars. That's where I got it. Still there. Plus 3.5, -115.
Yeah, fair point. I like the 3.5 -104. But listen, bro. I mean, I'm not going to stand either way. If that's what you like, that's what you like.
I'm in on it, brother. It's locked and loaded. It's those are the 2 things I've played so far. So I'm excited to talk about some other opinions where I'm leaning and see if we have disagreements or whatnot. But
yeah,
that's the units have been deployed on those 2.
Let's go to my former home in Tampa, Florida, where the Bucs will be hosting the Las Vegas Raiders at just under 7 points. It's a 6.5 point spread with a 46.5 point total. Tampa Bay had a butter matchup in Carolina last week, but since that Kansas City game a couple weeks ago, where they were double-digit underdog, Carolina has been showing up. Bryce Young has looked the best he's probably looked in his young career. Adam Thielen being back, he looks like that guy that was playing for Minnesota once upon a time. Now, Tampa Bay struggled and had to go to the annals of overtime. Very interesting game that was to pull that one out. Now, Las Vegas is this weird team. Gardner Minshew's done. Aiden O'Connell was fantastic in Kansas City. I think a lot of people, Eric, that follow the NFL knew that the Raiders were going to somehow make that a game, that Kansas City was not covering a 12.5 point spread on Black Friday. And Aiden O'Connell had a fantastic game against a good defense. Is there a regression here this week? Or does Tampa Bay find a way to put their pedal to the metal and finally overtake the division that you didn't think they were going to win?
Well, last week, I was rooting heavy for the Panthers. I didn't have action on the Panthers, but in the sense where for my Buccaneers futures that were alive somehow. If the Panthers would have won that game, my 6 exact win, 6 exact win, 7 under 7.5, all those were live. Now we spread harder on those, but I don't think the Las Vegas Raiders play well here. I know that the Buccaneers, again, their defense is beatable. Aiden O'Connell can probably move the football on them. Raiders have shown that they can, obviously they got to Mahomes. They always come ready for those Chiefs games. Like you mentioned, the Chiefs were never covering that spread on Black Friday. But I'm very low on Las Vegas. Like I have Las Vegas tied right now with the Giants for my worst teams in the National Football League. Tampa Bay, again, with their defense, I'm still not sold on them. And like Baker, while I think he deserves all the credit for what he's done for himself in his career, I still don't think that he's gonna, lead them to the promised land. But that being said, I make this game Tampa Bay minus 8.5. So I'm 2 points off, and like I've said a million times here, when I'm that far off or further, I defer to the market. But I think I have, at this point with my numbers, I feel pretty solid. So I haven't bet it, but I definitely lean Tampa Bay. Teasers, Tampa Bay, give me everything. I don't think that Las Vegas, they're a dead team walking. I think the Buccaneers can block them up front, which is huge. And Vegas hasn't been able to run the ball all year. Tampa's a little bit easier to run it on now, but I don't think Aiden O'Connell was good. I think it was one of those spots where the Chiefs D's been pretty bad all year. Raiders always come prepared to play against the Chiefs, and I don't think we see a repeat performance.
This is a big game for Tampa. So this division right now, and I think we talked about this like 3 weeks ago. You could have gotten the Bucks at like plus 325, 350 to win the division, the NFC South, because Atlanta obviously then had not a commanding, but a pretty solid lead with the 2 head-to-head wins, which at that time was huge. And now it's flipped. They're both 6-6. Atlanta sits up top because they have that head-to-head. But the Bucks right now, dude, they have an opportunity to beat the Raiders, see Atlanta realistically go into Minnesota on Sunday and lose, which then would put Tampa in the lead. But then Atlanta next week has at the Raiders, which honestly is no gimme right now. Then they come home to play the Giants. Then they go at Washington. That's a game that right now I think me and you both believe that they would lose if Kirk Cousins is still the quarterback. Still another revenge game. Then they finish at home against Carolina, where Tampa is at the Chargers next week. That's a tough spot. Then they're at Dallas, and they come home to play the Panthers, and then they come home to play the New Orleans Saints. So I would probably say Tampa has got the harder schedule remaining. So, if you're the Bucs, you can't afford to screw around like you did last week. And I obviously know it was a divisional game on the road, but the Buccaneers need to win as many games as they can because they are still live to take this division. I think they do. I believed it. I believed it preseason. And I think that's what's going to happen. They're starting to get healthy. Baker Mayfield, Mike Evans, Bucky Irving's turning into a star in that really, duo. So give me Tampa Bay with the points here. I like this one. I might lay multiple units on this. As a side note, I want to ask you to add on to your point that you're going to make. Brock Bowers, what kind of game do you have from Brock Bowers right now? The guy who might lead in catches in the NFL this season.
He's fucking awesome, dude. Like he's so cool. If Jaden Daniels didn't exist, he probably wouldn't Offensive Player of the Year award. But JD5, even at the current number of like minus 250, I think I could fact check that. I know it's at this point in the minus around that range. I think that's still undervalued. And yes, you could say homer this, homer that. I made this point on my Forward Progress show. We were talking about this on Monday. To win Offensive Rookie of the Year, minus 220 on DraftKings, I would hammer that still. I know it's obviously a feature. Yeah. Yes, bro. When you look at some of these passing efficiency charts, like with advanced data, like we're not just talking rookies. Like we're talking about where Jaden Daniels is plotted amongst all NFL quarterbacks, and he's in the same stratospheres as the Lamar Jacksons, Josh Allen, Joe Burrows of the world. And no, I'm not sitting here saying he's as good as those quarterbacks are, but yeah, I'm saying I have Jaden Daniels is not just a top rookie or one of the best rookies we've seen because he is that. He's a top 7 quarterback throwing the football in the National Football League. You know how he got kind of. I'm not even going to go into this, but yes, like that. If you want to debate it, I'm open to it. But I would lay the 220 with JD5 on that market. And that reason why I bring that up, so I think this is a similar situation spot to last week, where the Titans come off that huge divisional win. They go into Washington. The Commanders have been playing like shit, and the Commanders absolutely steamroll them. The Raiders are not a well-disciplined team. They're not a good special teams team. And they're not a good team at forcing turnovers. The Buccaneers play that really close game in overtime. Yes, the overtime fatigue does exist for defenses. They play a lot of snaps and then go into the next week, but no real travel there. And the Raiders aren't a team that's going to, really dominate you physically. They can't run the football whatsoever. And I think that situation where a much better team, as in Washington was Tennessee, after that, I guess, recency bias spot where you said Tennessee win, Washington smokes them. I'm with you that the Buccaneers should win. I'll be teasing Tampa with something 100%.
Yes. I again love Tampa. And I love Jaden Daniels. You know that. I'm a big JD guy. I believe in JD. I think JD is going to be a star in this league, and he's going to be a guy that I'm going to definitely be betting some MVP awards on throughout, his career. I did want to bring it up because you kind of brought in the offensive rookie of the year conversation as well. And listen, Brock Bowers, fantastic. But I think let's be fair with ourselves here. If Puka didn't win it last year, nobody's going to win.
I think that is yes, I agree. How could they?
And listen, CJ Stroud was good last year, but let's not act like he was record setting. He was a good rookie quarterback who had good numbers on a very good team. Puka was record setting as a rookie, and he was a nobody from nowhere. So let's get that out of the way. But Bo Nix didn't play great against the Browns, but I'm not so sure that Jaden Daniels is running away with this MVP. He was running away with it, and then it started chipping away as they were losing. Bo Nix is closing the gap because he's playing well. Denver's 8-5 in a much tougher AFC, poised to make the playoffs. Now he's on a bye, I believe. This
Broncos won 8 games last year. The Washington Commanders won 4. We've already won 8 games. Like Jaden has done so much more for this franchise. Again, like when you look at the metrics, he's with the best of the best. It's not something I'm gonna. And I sorry for cutting you off, but we talk about all the time, like getting in at good prices. You buy the dip with the recency bias. You try to get in at certain points in time, even though it's minus 220. Just considering also the fact that there's only 4 games left to consider as well. Like it's not like we're buying with minus 220 with 3/4 of a season left. I think that all Bo Nix's like pretty good game have done is just made the price on Jaden more valuable, and that's I'll die on the hill.
I don't know, dude. And listen, if Jaden Daniels wins, I'm not going to be upset. I really like him, but here's the thing: like Bo Nix coming into a situation here, in Denver, where I don't know. Again, it's arguably better. I mean, he's in a much tougher division. The NFC East is not good outside of Philadelphia. Like, it's been even worse for Dallas than me and you both thought. Me and you both hated Dallas this year. We thought no chance for the playoffs. The Giants are even worse. And Bo Nix is contending in the AFC West, where you're going to have the Chiefs and the Chargers most likely both in the playoffs, and Denver's probably going to make it. Now, you can make an argument that the stats are a little bit better on the side of Bo Nix with total touchdowns and
the
picks.
Counting stats are better. All the advanced stats point to Jaden being as good as the best people in the entire NFL.
I mean, the counting stats are important.
My stats are basically the same. If anything, if it's better, it's 51% to 49% better for Bo Nix. If you want to even call the counting stats better, JD's finally getting his bye this week. I don't know if the Broncos have a bye. I should probably know that.
Broncos have their bye this week too.
Broncos as well. So both guys are on a bye this week, so we're not going to see massive movement. Honestly, I hope Bowers puts up 300 this week so we get better value on JD5 next week.
Yeah, I mean, listen, bro, I don't have a problem with Jaden Daniels winning. I mean, it's a close race. He's been the leader the whole way. So if he won, I have no issue. I love JD, but I'm just saying I think Bo Nix at plus 230. And I'm not even saying this for recency bias. I think this is definitely something that's a little bit more live. I'm not rushing in to take Jaden Daniels right now. Maybe heading into last week when he was still minus 170, then yeah. But I will say this, though. This is the make or break part of the schedule. Once they come back from the bye,
Saints.
Denver's got the Colts. They're at the Chargers. They're at the Bengals, and they're home to the Chiefs. So if in those last 4 games, Bo Nix puts up solid numbers, and he's even able to go 2-2, then it's a really good boon on his case. Whereas, Jaden Daniels and Washington, if I can find it, they'll be coming back with
New
At New
Orleans.
Orleans, the Eagles, tough game. Falcons, they'll probably win, and the Cowboys. So they have a little bit easier of a schedule. So, do with that what you will.
He's healthy, man. He's finally healthy. Now he gets to buy. I'm telling you. And I like the back and forth. But again, I'm not sure. Even if you're not, running to the window to bet it, which obviously I understand. If somebody out there listening is, and we cash, I'll be glad to look back at this.
That'll be a good one. All right. Jaguars, Titans, 3.5 points. I personally won't be betting much on the side or the total. Maybe later in the week I'll get into some player props, throwing like Tony Pollard anytime touchdown on the board, or maybe Westbrook Ikine for his fucking 9th touchdown in his last 9 games, or something along those lines. But I don't know. Do you have anything on a side or total?
Nah, this is not a game I have much interest in. Just give the numbers because I run them. Anyway, I do see value with Jacksonville, though I'm not sure if I readjusted enough for the dip back to Trevor Lawrence. I mean, back from Trevor Lawrence to Mac Jones. At market, I'm not even going to pretend to want to bet this game, watch this game, or I do think I didn't adjust enough for Lawrence. So, I make it 2.25 as it stands. With adjusting, we probably get around 3.5, and then on my market, nothing to do with it.
I would probably bet. I'd probably bet Tennessee if I was betting anybody. I think obviously last week they got smoked, but there was a couple of things that kind of hurt them. That they fumbled a couple times in the territory. So that's fluky, and that's hard to repeat on a week-to-week basis. Carolina's catching 12.5 at Philly. So for the most part, the double-digit favorites were doing really well. Lately, the last couple weeks, it's been the opposite, where the dogs have been cashing. Now, Philadelphia obviously is presenting themselves as, I would say, the second best team in football behind Detroit. I don't know where you put that, but it's safe to say that they're up there. What I want to know is, after a great win at Baltimore, do you think this spot is a bit of a look-ahead spot with Pittsburgh on deck next week?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so at all. I think the Eagles steamroll them.
So you'd lay the 12.5?
I'd lay the 12.5. I haven't laid it. I would take, if you're a 10-point teaser person, I would take Philly. If you're trying to juice up like a money line, you want to take like a Eagles like minus 5.5 or 6.5 to obviously get that key number of 7 down. I would support it. Even though it's not a plus EV decision, I'm just saying though, like if you're feeding that action, you want that extra leg. I think that Philly is live for that. I want to talk about Bryce Young. So obviously there's been so much going on social media. We talk about all the time how this is the recency bias league of all leagues is the NFL's MO. I'm curious your thoughts on Bryce Young. It's obvious that he went from being the worst quarterback, like by a mile in the NFL, to now being like probably the 22nd worst quarterback in the NFL, which is a massive upgrade. Don't get me wrong, but how much of the hype or the resurgence are you buying, Johnny?
I mean, listen, dude, it's great to see. I think if you're talking in terms of like what does Carolina do next year, I think you probably let them play out the rest of the season to see what you have over, a 6-week sample. But right now, I mean, listen, it's great what the kid's doing, but if we're being honest, he hasn't been, that great. I would say he's been good. I mean, against Tampa, he threw for 298 with a 56.5 point completion percentage. He got a couple touchdowns. The week before against Kansas City, he made some great decisions. He's been good. And the reason why it's a big deal is because it's such an improvement on what we've seen from him. Fair point. I think if you have a chance to get a quarterback, go get one. I don't know if he is the answer. I don't love Bryce Young, and I hate to say it. I don't know how much of a future he has as a team, a future franchise quarterback that can lead a team, not just to the playoffs, but allow them to have a deep run. I don't know if I see it. I don't know if the tools are necessarily polished or even there. He strikes me more as a backup and maybe a good bridge quarterback. So, listen, it's cool to see what he's doing. Maybe he turns it around, but I don't really think he's a long-term answer in Carolina. I thought it was a bad decision. I don't think but the thing is, it's easy to say, oh, well, if they had Stroud, what would they do? But if Stroud was in this situation with this roster, we're probably having a different conversation on what CJ Stroud looks like. So I do believe they need to get the right people around there. And, I'm not saying Dave Canales isn't one of them. Honestly, I think it comes from the ownership. I think the ownership is the biggest problem because David Tepper is beyond impatient. I'm sure he's a great businessman. He's a billionaire. He's made a lot of money in hedge funds. But in terms of running a football team, I just don't think that's his forte.
No, and I think that was really well said. And I'm glad you said that because I was just curious whether you were kind of like drinking the Kool-Aid a little bit, seeing the improvement or where your head was at. And, obviously we're going to have tons of time to discuss the Panthers, future, all off season long. But for this game particularly, though, I'll go back to it. I think the Eagles smoke them. Like Bryce Young has performed well in a couple of games against the Chiefs defense, which has been horrible this year. The Chiefs never cover big numbers and are notorious for playing down to some of these weaker opponents. And the Buccaneers defense that we talked about is also horrendous. And we've seen some like circus miracle catches from like these receivers they're making plays for them. And again, I can't overstate that going from being the 37th best quarterback, even including other people who played snaps, and then being the 22nd, that's a massive improvement. That's more of an improvement from going from 24 to like 17 probably. Yeah. But with that being said, it was against much more inferior competition. I don't know if people probably saw the tweets at this point. Barkley's rush yard line is like 115.5, 113.5, or something like that. And it's warranted. The Eagles defense is by far the biggest threat that Bryce Young has seen in recent weeks. And there is just nothing that tells me that Saquon doesn't run all over them. And I think that this game is a blowout for Philly.
So where would you put let's see, hold on. It's kind of crazy. Where would you put the amount of points? You can do a Philly alternate total in terms of how many points they score. So right now they're projected in like that 29.5 range. So basically whether they're going to score 30 or not. I mean, you can say, hey, listen, I think they're going to blow Carolina the fuck out. Let's take them over. Let's take them over 45.5 at 15-1.
I don't even necessarily love that because I think it's going to just be them running the ball down their throat. They'll be on offense for, almost 3/4 of the game, and it's going to be more of like a 28-6 than like a 47-17.
Yeah, but a lot of people could have said the same thing about Detroit, and Detroit against like Jacksonville or Detroit against Tennessee. Detroit and Philly are very similar with the fact that they're very run heavy and they'll run the ball 50 times and they could still get it done. And they scored 50 respectively on both Detroit or on Jacksonville and Tennessee. So I mean, all I'm saying is if you want to get more action and instead of like, maybe you can take an additional total, like a bigger spread where you're going to say instead of 12.5, I'm going to take Philly minus 21. I mean, a different avenue at 15-1 to say, hey, Philadelphia can score over 45.5 points, saying they're going to score 46 or more and get them at 15-1. I mean, it's a fun little sprinkle bet if you want to throw like $25 on it.
Yeah, I would in that situation, I would prefer the alt spread than going for an alt team total, but I understand the thought process and wanting to go for the opposite route than I would want to go. All I'm saying is I would prefer alt spread lines than a Philly massacre in terms of putting up crazy points line. But obviously, considering I love Philly, I could be wrong on everything. The Panthers going out right for all we know, of course. But I see where you're coming from 100%.
Surprise, Carolina's only plus 520 to win outright. For 12.5 points at Philadelphia doesn't seem like enough, to be fair. Maybe that's just me. So Atlanta, we'll get to this at the end, but we talked about Atlanta. We both believe in the Vikings this weekend. The Jets are in Miami. Sure would be nice to be in Miami this time of year. I'm actually going to South Florida, not next week, but the week after. So I'll be having fun. But 6.5 points here against the Jets. I'll get this out of the way real quick. Personally, I think the Jets are beyond done, not just mathematically, but I think they've had it with Rodgers. I think Rodgers wants out. I think, and I was wrong about this. I felt like the Jets were going to be good this year. I think this is a failed experiment. I don't know what it is, whether Rodgers is really that washed or he just doesn't want to be there, or it's I don't know, a combination of everything. But either way, I think the Jets are cooked. They just don't look like they want to play football anymore, especially after what happened against Seattle on Sunday. I think that was kind of like, hey, this is our chance to kind of turn the ship around and end the year strong. I think Miami runs away with this one.
So this is, again, I'm 3 points off market, so I'm just going to assume I'm wrong. My numbers like the Jets. But I'd rather talk a little bit more holistically about New York, because I think what you were talking about, whether like what to really blame it on, it's another ownership failure. Top-down businesses. The owner is horrific. They run their football operation poorly from literally the ownership. So that's why the culmination of things have happened. I saw a funny tweet the other day. It was like, all the Jets are is Aaron Rodgers and his friends and a bunch of four really talented, 23 to 25-year-olds. Then the rest of the team were just players. Like it's so true. Like obviously GW and Brees are epic. They have a couple other, you could still say Sauce Gardner. They always have like a down year. Maybe one other guy on the defense, and then it's Rodgers, Lazard, and co. But yeah, I was down on New York. I obviously wasn't. I think honestly, I'll blame. I will take the blame for it, but at the same time, I think I did drink a little bit of the Kool-Aid, thinking they'd maybe be a playoff team, though I didn't have them winning the AFC East. But in this matchup, I think that the Dolphins, their offense has been great. We knew that was a letdown spot. I had the Packers on Thanksgiving. I was like, bro, like 2 in the cold, that's automatic. And I think now that they're home, they can maybe flex their muscles against this clearly dead Jets team. I'm off market, so I'm probably not going to have any action in this one.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know if I'm running to the window to bet Miami, but I think there's going to be some opportunities to get in on them. I will say their run defense has been playing a lot better recently, the last couple weeks. So maybe that affects how I play Devon Achane on his rushing. But then again, I might just continue to test them and see if they cave. But yeah. So I mean, listen, I completely understand why numbers wise it might make sense to take the Jets. I just feel like they're kind of giving up.
Yeah,
At least Rodgers is. So it's hard to quantify that. Like, because when you're setting a line, you're looking at matchups, X's and O's, players, potential outcomes because of what happens when the Jets do this or Miami does that. But how do you account for a guy that just doesn't give a shit anymore? Mm-hmm. How do you account for a guy that's like checked out? He's got one of the worst cases of senioritis I've ever seen. And I'm not saying that just because he's checking out, but because he's basically old enough to be a senior citizen at this point.
I agree with you. I bet the Jets against Seattle last week. Obviously, brutal. That lost in disgusting fashion, though you can make the argument they should have never even been in that game in the first place. So it won't be catching me taking the Jets until 2025.
Yeah, that's for sure. What about the Giants at home getting 3.5 against NOLA?
Yeah, I'm surprised it's 3.5 at FanDuel because it's still 4.5 at DraftKings, 4.5 at a bunch of other shops. Obviously, we're still relatively early in the week. There were some 5s earlier. I thought I was going to say, because I definitely saw a 5 when we were recording, but that was already gone. 5 being a dead number. Give me the Giants all day long, even on the money line. What about you, Johnny?
Drew Lock. The thing is, I don't think Norm's that good. Now they lost Taysom Hill. Derek Carr has shown that he's not really that good. Hill, even though I can't stand him, he's a very valuable member of this New Orleans offense. Torn ACL. really their only guy now with all these injuries they have at receiver is Alvin Kamara. I mean, yeah, you got Marquez Valdez-Scantling having a renaissance type of month, but I don't know if it's enough. This might be one where I stay off the 3.5 favorite. And based on what it's looking like, that 3.5 for New Orleans is tipping at -120, which means the scale is about to tip to 4. So I would probably hang back if I'm gonna bet this game. I'd probably hang back to see more action come on New Orleans and maybe get a better number with the Giants. Because even though the Giants aren't a good team, Drew Lock, I mean, he can score a little bit. You still got Malik Neighbors, you got Wandale, Tyrone Tracy. The defensive line is still good. Kayvon Thibodeau came back with Brian Burns. There is some talent on this Giants team. So the fact is, I think, as you do, that they can cover outside of a field goal at home against an offense that is virtually revolved around one guy now.
Yeah, I don't think the Saints are. The Saints have had a little bit of like a Mickey Mouse run. They've got a lot of luck in the kicking game. They obviously played the Rams tough, but I think that's more of an indictment on, Los Angeles. I think the Saints are coming off a bye heading into that game. Actually, I don't know if that is true regardless, but this is more of a guts play. It's another example of where my numbers are really far off. So I'm not going to, think that I'm a genius by any means and think that I'm so correct. But with that being said, I think that like what you mentioned was the bye for the Saints prior. So yeah, they beat up Cleveland, which we know like your biggest boom or bust team. They beat Atlanta, which we know at this point is not a massive flex. Yes, that one touchdown loss against the Rams, I think it's a classic letdown spot. And I know that that's obviously not like the best handicap, but I think it's a Saints come back to earth spot. Giants put together a little bit of energy and mess up their tank because obviously they probably, ownership probably rather lose games at this point, but the players don't tank. I think that they come out ready to play. The Saints are nowhere near as good. I make this game actually Saints -1.5. So I'm really far off. There's some 4.5s out there for the Giants. If you're 10-point teasing, I would 10-point tease with the Giants and the Eagles, and we'll talk about maybe the final leg we will talk about moving forward, but I think the Giants win outright.
I don't think that's a long shot. This is where the Giants usually like to do their damage and win and ruin their draft pick at this point in the season. So very realistic. Okay, so this is a game 2 weeks ago. Last time we met, actually, and I don't know if I like or dislike when the NFL schedules a divisional matchup twice in 3 weeks, but we have one. You liked the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle against Arizona 2 weeks ago. I liked Arizona, and it was a very close game. Seattle ends up coming up on top. The Cardinals do not score a touchdown. The Cardinals were a team I liked getting the 3.5 last week in Minnesota. I had them on my Circa Millions. And I thought they were live to win. And frankly, they should have won. Another kind of botched job, a game that Minnesota, I think, was handed more than they actually took, my opinion. But now with Arizona, I would say struggling a little bit. They've been so inconsistent. Do you think this is another Seattle spot in Arizona for the Seahawks to kind of take a stranglehold in that division?
See, I don't think Seattle's that good. I think Arizona, it makes sense because, again, I don't think Arizona's home field is 2.5. Look at the lines from last week. I think it closed, basically, we could call it a PK, though. There might have closed even Seattle -1. So the number, I think, is correct from like a power rating standpoint that Arizona should be favored at home. I don't think Seattle is this – I don't think this resurgence for Seattle is like them coming into their own and becoming a beast. I think it's just general regression of them because they're playing like crap, but they're not a crappy team, but they're absolutely not a great team either way. I think Arizona deserves a ton of credit for how they played Minnesota, and they were a 4th down decision away from maybe winning that football game. And I do agree with you that the Vikings, won that game despite probably losing that game. So I'm probably passing on this one. I have Seattle futures. This is a big game for those futures, so I would like Seattle to win, but I'm probably not betting this one. And I think that everything about it honestly makes sense. I think it's priced appropriately, total spread, and I think we see another good football game.
Okay, so play devil's advocate here, and let's say you are getting involved. Right now on FanDuel, Seahawks are favored to win the division at plus 145. Then it's the Cardinals at plus 180. Then it's the Rams at plus 290. Then it's the Niners at 14-1. God knows how much I want to take a shot on the Niners right now, even still to overcome all this adversity. But so this game is big, right? I mean, you have Seattle, who's currently in the lead. They got the win over Arizona. They got the win over San Francisco. Well, split, yes. So now if they beat the Cardinals twice, not only the 8-5, but they have a twofer. They have the sweep on Arizona here. Now I feel like both of us think the Rams are both going to lose. Are you of the belief that you would ride Arizona here if you think they're going to win for the division at plus 180? That would put both teams at 7-6, and that would be a split in the division. And if you look at their schedule the rest of the way, they have the Patriots next week, then they're at the Panthers, then they're at the Rams, then they're home to the 49ers. So obviously the last two divisional games are huge, but they have an opportunity if they win this one to get to 7-6. They can beat the Patriots to get to 8-6, and they can beat the Panthers to get to 9-6. Then they might only have to win one of their last two to get to 10-7.
No, it's feasible. It's very feasible. I agree that that's probably the better way, because even to make the playoffs, I don't think it's worth it because it's plus 168. But the way that the NFC is shaping up, it might be they're more alive for the division than they are for the wild card. So I would agree that if you're looking to bet Arizona futures, it is to win the West. And I think that's a good way to attack it. I think that is a very fair way to attack it with Arizona. And I think it's obviously anything is possible, but if I were as a betting man, yes, I think the Arizona Cardinals can certainly win this football game. And that's a good way to go about betting this game without, laying the 2.5.
Seattle's won 3 in a row. They beat the 49ers, they beat the Cardinals, they beat the Jets, right? So this is a little bit more onto the side of the divisional play. Now, this is Seattle's rest of the way, and this is why it gets very interesting. They're at the Cardinals this week. Then they come home to play the Packers, home against the Vikings. Then they go on the road to Chicago. Then they go at the Rams. Personally, I think Arizona's probably got the easier path, especially if they win this one. If they win this one, you might see the division flip. Now, personally, I think both of us like Seattle coming this year. We felt this is a team that was going to make the playoffs. You're going to have Mike McDonald's come in and make a big impact. And, the defense has started to step up a little bit and play better. I don't think it's at the level that we thought it would be, kind of like that throwback Baltimore Ravens defense from, half a decade ago. But I'm honestly talking myself into, at this point, I wouldn't even bet this game. I would just bet the Cardinals plus 180 to win the division, because I'd rather put 100 to win 180 now for the Cardinals to win the division in a better scenario than lay 142 for them to win, or even lay 110 for them to have to win by 3 against Seattle on Sunday.
No, I totally get it. I have Seattle over 7.5 wins, so I technically have the money line in this game, and obviously everything moving forward. I have Seahawks to make the playoffs as well. So if I wanted to hedge, I guess I agree with you. I would hedge with Cardinals. It's not a direct hedge, of course, but if I were to want to try to limit some exposure, I would take the Cardinals in the division, like you're saying as well. I'm just sitting on the sideline riding my futures here.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. I just, it's good though, because now people have a better idea of what to look out for, because now we're getting into the territory here. You can bet the game. You can bet the side, you can bet the total, you can bet the money line, whatever. But now if you look at it a little bit closer, there's opportunities to take advantage of the futures markets, whether that's divisions or conference or awards. So, when you're looking at these games from pretty much now till the end of the year, make sure you keep an eye on how this could potentially impact a futures market.
100%.
The next one is interesting. Chargers at the Chiefs. KC laying 3.5 at home to the Chargers. Eric, I like the Chargers, and if they covered, it wouldn't surprise me. But I think this is probably a Kansas City spot for me. They have had trouble laying the big numbers and covering, but they've done a lot better covering the smaller numbers. Divisional game. This is basically if they win, they're gonna put away the AFC West, clinch another division title, and that's that.
I agree. Not something I have a strong opinion on, have bet yet. I make the game. Actually, I make KC a much bigger favorite. Probably a little bit too low on LA, but we're still too high on KC. Though I've obviously downgraded them. They're not even close to my top team in football. But either way, I think that this is a Chiefs spot as well. I agree.
Yeah. I don't know if you have any inkling on other markets for the Chiefs, but yeah, it's just I think this is a Kansas City spot all the way. They've been the little brother, and without J.K. Dobbins, they don't have a consistent enough running game to keep this Chiefs offense on the sideline.
And also, it's just something to note, and this is not why I think the Chiefs, but these are, again, we talk about trends for situations. Like, this is a situational spot where the Chiefs are coming off of Black Friday, so they have that rest advantage. The Chargers have had to go on the road, crossing multiple time zones twice since their Monday Night Football game being at home against the Ravens. And actually, shout out to TA Analytics, he's ran these numbers where teams that have the 1 to 3 day rest advantage, and it hasn't happened that often. And in the following game, those teams are 2-5 against the spread on the second leg of the cross country, like back and forth, like on not because obviously they went to Atlanta, now they're going back to Kansas City, starting in LA. That's already on a short week. Those situations in that second game, they're 2-5 against the spread. Obviously, very small sample size, but definitely something to note when you then add in the fact that KC finally has Pacheco back, and the Chargers' run defense is not great against good teams. I had something else on there, but I just forgot what I was going to say. And obviously the Dobbins injury that really limits his offense a little bit. So that's more science point in Kansas City.
So the 3.5 for KC is -118 here, but on DraftKings, it's out to 4 now, and even 110 across the board. I mean, to me, you always want to get as many points as you can. You never know, a 2-point conversion or a missed PAT. If you're doing your standard $100 bet, typically you always want to try and get the best price you can. But, I personally don't want to, give more points, even though 4 from 3.5 to 4 is not a key number. You just never know how it rolls. And I know it might cost you $8 more. And if you're $118 to win 100 type of better, then fine. I mean, maybe if you're a $5,000 better where the $8 VIG is more money, then you go lay the 4 if that's something you're comfortable with. Okay, got a few more games here. Let's finish them up. You got San Francisco, a lot of 3.5s this week. They are a small favorite at home, -120 on the 3.5. Another big one for the 49ers against the Chicago Bears. The news, Christian McCaffrey is out. Terrible. They got smoked in that Snow Bowl. Chicago's defense has not looked lately like the elite unit, the Super Bowl unit that a lot of people, including us, has expected. But obviously, it is still a formidable defense. Now, granted, the Bears are on a historic downturn with a lot of bad luck, but they're also on a 6-game losing streak. Eric, I think 3.5 is a little too generous here. I probably would say the 49ers should be closer to 6 points at home. McCaffrey's big, but Isaac Orendo, there's no reason to think he can't step in and have a solid game. Still got Debo, still got George Kittle. I don't know if Trent Williams is going to be back. I don't know if Nick Bosa is going to be back. And Chicago is this interesting team. They're high variance, and they kind of go as Caleb goes. First game without Eberflus, maybe losing him is a kick in the ass to them. But I think San Francisco playing for their season here, this is like the last-ditch effort that they have. They're going to come out firing at home on Sunday afternoon with most of their weapons still intact.
Yeah, I actually make this 3.75, so I'm right there. So I don't feel as strongly toward the Niners as you do, but I do agree that if it gets to 3 or even 2.5, the 49ers are definitely worth wagering on. Obviously, have that little bit of a rest advantage for Chicago playing Thursday. 49ers flying back from Buffalo on a late night Sunday. Obviously, losing McCaffrey, losing Jordan Mason too. It's the Guriendo show now. If you got him in fantasy on waivers, hopefully you can make a run with him. But I don't have much to add. I think it's crazy looking at it now based on how the seasons have transpired that you're seeing this game where it is only 3.5. So that's why I can see fully where you're coming from, that even though it makes sense that, if this was happening under normal circumstances, you probably would expect this line to be like San Francisco minus like 8.5.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree with you where it could have been an overcorrection to some of these injuries. And I'm right on market, so I'm laying it completely off, but I understand thinking the Niners are getting disrespected by dropping too much.
Yeah. Not their year, but maybe it is their game. We already talked about Buffalo, LA. We both like Buffalo. Last game of the week is Monday night, Cincinnati, reverse Royal Mint, laying 5.5 at Dallas. The Bengals, life support is not even the word anymore. I think they could win out and they still would need help at this point in order to make the playoffs. But laying 5.5 at Dallas, who really didn't impress. Yes, they put up 27 points against the Giants, and they can definitely do that against this really bad Cincinnati defense. But, they were barely able to beat the Giants. That game came down pretty close. We know Joe Burrow and this offense can put up. So I actually like Cincinnati to win and cover. I might even look towards the over 49.5 as well.
I was sleeping at the wheel here, unfortunately, because let me just make sure because I obviously could have made a mistake, but let me check. Never mind. I misread. So I actually made this game closer. Obviously, I've downgraded Cincinnati, and Cincinnati's offense, historic numbers, defense, ruining them. I saw a stat on Twitter the other day. I don't want to completely misquote it, but the Bengals have been the first team in NFL history to score 38 points and lose twice, and the third team to put up 35 and lose once, and a bunch of these stats about how they've lost more games than any team ever who's put up these offensive metrics from a pure scoring points perspective, which obviously is the goal. And Dallas, yeah, you beat up on the Giants. Yeah, you get that game against Washington where you win, which they deserve a ton of credit for. But I could see the Bengals coming out and stroking them. I make this game actually closer to Cincinnati, only -4. So I see clear value with Dallas. But again, when I'm so far off like I am now, especially seeing the early support coming in on Cincinnati against the spread, actually the support's coming against Dallas. This was 6.5. So maybe I am onto something, and we'll see if it keeps going down. It's a game I'm fully going to monitor throughout the week and throughout the day prior. Because like I said, especially with these primetime games, the late steam has been hitting. The teams that are getting steamed heavily. I know we talked about this, John. I think it was the Giants-Bengals game where we both liked the Giants, and it was 3.5, and all of a sudden they got to 4.5, closer to kickoff, and we were both yeah, let's get on the Giants now. Normally that steam is fadeable, but this year the steam's been pretty on point, and I think it's a situation where I'm waiting and seeing, and if it comes into Dallas' direction, continues to go to, I missed a good number, so I'll probably lay off, but I wouldn't be shocked to see the Bengals be that team that gets that money and can absolutely smoke them.
Yeah, listen, Cincinnati's probably not making the playoffs. It's unfortunate. I know I really want them to make it. I know Joe Burrow, deserves to be in the MVP conversation. It would be a lot of fun to watch them, wreak havoc in the AFC. But the ship looks like it sails. The team in the 7th spot right now is Denver, and they're 8-5 compared to Cincinnati's 4-8. So imagine what would have to happen for Cincinnati to finish 9-8, run the table, and basically have Miami, Indianapolis, and Denver to all pretty much collapse. You'd probably be better off trying to hit the lottery than that.
It's over. It's over. Bengals fans, I'm sorry to say it is over.
But that doesn't mean that Cincinnati's going to give up and fold it. So, I expect to see points here. I think Dallas putting up 20 to 23, Cincinnati putting up, I would say, 27 to 31 is reasonable. So it does put the over in play as well. But yeah, I do like Cincinnati as of right now.
Yeah, no, definitely understood. So I'm looking just at the board real quick because I've been betting totals also lately. But these totals I've been getting mostly betting a little bit later in the week. Like I hit last week, very fortunately, on the Patriots Colts that came out to that last play where they scored that touchdown to push it over. But I feel pretty strongly about some of these against the spread bets I've taken. And there's been times where it's been, just some leans, just some thoughts on some certain things. But just like I'm gonna recap here, bets that I played, I took the Vikings at 4.5. There are 5.5s out there. I still love. Actually, some 6s are popping up as we speak. So, like we talked about, Johnny, I don't think that's going to close a roll in spot. Thursday, Packers was 3.5 at Caesars. It's still there, -115. I bet that as well. And teams for it, a 3-team teaser. If you want to go 10-point, if that's your method, I think Philly is certainly live there. I love the Packers getting 13.5 and the Giants to 14.5. I think the Giants, I haven't bet it yet, but I think the Giants in a teaser, 6-point, or if you're going 10-point, and I think that they're worth, if you want to do like a money line underdog sprinkler for the week, I would think Packers, Giants, and so one more we discussed. No, Packers, Giants, and if you want to just add my other favorites on the money line, Vikings, and Eagles, which obviously doesn't have a lot of value, but those are like my 4 teams that I think will win outright.
Before we get out of here, we did almost miss one game. That's the Browns at the Steelers. Steelers at home and not a snow globe are a much bigger favorite this time around, 6.5 points. Cleveland played a very interesting game 2 Thursdays ago, or last Thursday, and they beat Pittsburgh, and it was a bad loss for Pittsburgh because they kind of stumbled, let Baltimore hang around, open the door. But luckily, that kind of corrected itself this week. I don't think Pittsburgh loses twice to Cleveland. I think the snow, the weather had a lot to do with that. Yes, I do think Cleveland's defense did some things that kind of halted the Steelers' offense early before the snow got bad. But, I expect that not to be the case this time around. I do think 6.5 points is a lot.
Yeah, I actually make it 7.5 for Pittsburgh. So I do see some value with the Steelers. But the AFC North, some of these games, it's like, I think I saw a tweet and it's just true. It's like the Bengals the Pittsburgh Steelers did beat the Bengals last week, but it was like the Ravens can't beat the Steelers can't beat the Browns, and the Steelers can't beat the Bengals can't beat the Browns, something like that. It's just how the AFC North goes. So it's not something I want to get involved with, though I do make it actually a little bit short on Pittsburgh's side. Jameis Winston's obviously one of the most fun quarterbacks to watch just because you never know what the hell or who's going to score every time there's a football. Somebody's scoring, whether it's his team or the other team. So I guess for me personally, it would be just to sit back and appreciate the Jameis Winston experience. And numbers-wise, I do like Pittsburgh in teasers, though I wouldn't say just from my feeling of the games. Like, obviously, I've spoken more highly of other games that I feel stronger about. This is not high on that radar where I think I really feel strongly about Pittsburgh here.
Yeah, I don't really have anything that I'm dying for right now. One thing I did want to mention, actually, that I said we're going to come back to, with this Falcons-Vikings game. And we didn't have a chance to talk about it last week because we weren't here. But I ended up, and anybody that follows me knows, I took a crazy shot at 151 on Andrew Van Ginkel to win Defensive Player of the Year, which was totally wrong in price. And he was so much shorter everywhere. And basically within 4 days, 151 became 22-1. Now he's after Sunday's game where he narrowly missed 2 sacks and an interception against Kyler Murray. I mean, Jesus Christ, if there was a stat for almost, then he'd be at the top of the list. But anyway, he drifted back to 35-1. I think Andrew Van Ginkel is a very interesting candidate for Defense Player of the Year. He's on a playoff team. He's one of the best, arguably the best player on the best defense, or one of the best defenses. He's a guy who right now is like 2 sacks off or 2.5 sacks off the league lead. He has the most defensive touchdowns. He's up there. He's like second in tackles for loss. He's got 2 interceptions, most of any front 7 player, I think, in the league. There's a lot of stats that he has. And the thing is, he's not necessarily a full-time true pass rusher. He's sort of like a Micah Parsons Walmart version in the sense that he does a lot of things that don't go in the stat book. He plays some off ball as well. So I think Van Ginkel is very interesting. It's not necessarily saying he's going to win, but even at 35-1, and there's other prices at different books, he's worth the shot. Now, obviously, he narrowly missed a big day on Sunday, but if he has one of those big days, he can shake the market. And if you look at who is in the running on paper for Defensive Player of the Year right now, TJ Watt at minus 250 is just too big. I'm sorry. His production's been good, but it's not runaway good. Xavier McKinney, defensive backs rarely ever win the award. Surtain, same category. Myles Garrett's 20-1. They're not making the playoffs. He got a charity DPOY last year. Chris Jones' stats aren't enough to turn the award. Danielle Hunter's interesting. He had a wreak havoc game that kind of put him in that conversation. But I probably would say Hunter doesn't win. Will Anderson and Hunter are kind of in that same thing. They're kind of taking away from each other. Kirby Josephs, get back to the secondary player. Jalen Carter, I don't think Jalen Carter is going to win. Too many mouths to feed, too many guys. Leonard Williams had a pick 6, so he magically just jumped. Greenard for the Vikings is doing very well. Hendrickson, unfortunately, he's fallen way back. He hasn't had much production. The other guy who's probably live is Nick Benito. He had a pick 6 and a sack or 2 on Monday. But I do think Van Ginkel at 35-1. I know, the future thing was not something in plan tonight, but I wanted to bring that up. What do you think?
I haven't really been paying much attention to the market because I don't have any equity. Like last year I had Myles Garrett, so fortunately coming through with a winner there. And, I was checking that market, nonstop. We did sprinkle in our futures talk with, the Goff conversation, the JD5 OPOY, which again, even though it's minus money, still think it's worth it. But I don't have any real devil's advocate or backing for, the look. Obviously, you are securing value and it's live with Van Ginkel, but it's just genuinely not a market that I paid much attention to the outcome, nor have I even paid attention to, who is kind of dominating individually on that side of the ball. I think Myles Garrett is still alive despite how bad they are, considering how the rest of the market is shaping up. He turned up so hard against the Steelers in that game in Cleveland. He had to prove a point with their history between Myles Garrett and the Pittsburgh Steelers. If he does that again and wrecks the game entirely, considering again the lack of a strong candidate at this point, he could still be in the race, though teams that win games generally have the DPOY, which is something working in your favor and even like Patino's favor, and obviously TJ Watt's favor. But I don't have any real strong thoughts to go for or against here, Johnny.
Yeah, no, it's fair. I figured I'd ask. I think Van Ginkel's, live. It's definitely an interesting award this year of all years. But I will say, I think Nick Benito, his candidacy is kind of gotten interesting at 40-1. I don't think he'll win, but somebody that I'm keeping my eye on for the next month or so. But that should do it. We appreciate everybody stopping by. Eric, great as usual. If you have any other takes before we get out of here, otherwise, we'll see you next week. And we hope everybody has some winners, cash some bets, eat some food on Sunday. and let's get after it. We'll see you next week. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
Have a good one, guys.